Hello and welcome to another episode of the Adventure Games podcast. My name is Shorter Than Bar and I hope everybody is well. Now, for this episode, I was delighted to be joined by James Simpson of Goldfire Studios, who is working on Arctic Awakening, a new open world adventure game set in, you guessed it, the Arctic. Now, this game looks absolutely fascinating to me. I love the setting, as I told James. Now, if you play it or if you see it, you might think, the lazy description might be The Long Dark meets Firewatch. But James told me he'd never played The Long Dark. And as anyone who's been listening years, there still are people to this podcast. When I spoke about The Long Dark, I said that I played as much as I could of the game, but I couldn't finish it because it was so hard. And what I would love is a game that was similar, but without the survival aspects and focus on the story and exploration. And this game seems to be it. And James spoke about more detail about the game and about how he went method in order to prepare for the game, how he literally flew a plane as your character does at the beginning of the game, and how he went into the wilderness himself to see what it would be like and how the character would feel, and a lot more besides. Now, this interview on YouTube, unfortunately, there's no video, but I've included some videos and some screenshots, so hopefully they'll keep you going if you're watching on YouTube. And yeah, so first of all, so here is a trailer, first of all, for the game, followed by my interview with James Simpson. So please enjoy.
Hello, Kai. I thought you could use some company up here.
Yeah, not really. I'm good.
Oh, shit! Hey, let's go!
Donovan? Donovan, you copy? Hey, drone, wake up.
Oh, hello, sir.
I must have unexpectedly powered off.
Yeah, so did I.
I do want to help in any way I can, Kai.
You can help by staying out of it. Oh, get out of here!
Hello? Kai? You out there?
Oh, thank God. I thought I'd lost you.
Was that Donovan I heard on the radio?
What, you're spying on me now?
I got it covered, Boy Scout. Landed by some big-ass silos. A power station, maybe?
Wait, power station? Out here? Hey, Donovan. Donovan, you copy? No thermal vision, no lasers, no useful functions whatsoever. Can you do anything to actually help?
I am happy to talk it through with you.
Thank you so much for joining for another episode of the Adventure Games podcast. I am delighted to be joined by, I believe it's the CEO of Goldfire Studios and developer of our Arctic Awakening, James Simpson. Hello, James. How are you?
Hi, I'm doing good. How about you?
I'm okay. Now, as I was telling you before we started recording, and just advance warning to anybody listening, unfortunately, I tested positive just a few days before this interview. Now, I'm doing okay. It's mild dose, thankfully, but apologies in advance if I do cough a little bit during this interview. I'll try and go on mute as much as possible if I do have to cough, but I'm doing okay overall, so thank you for asking. Now, as I told you, I'm really looking forward to hearing more about your game, Arctic Awakening, and also I played a bit of the demo as well. Looking forward to the game being released.
Oh, great.
So now, before we talk about that and your studio, then I was wondering if you could give a brief introduction about yourself and say what are some of your favorite adventure/narrative games that you've enjoyed. If there are many, if there are any.
Yeah. So I guess sort of my background, I got into making games when I was around 13 years old. And just, as a hobby, I didn't really
Wow.
I didn't really understand it as an industry, getting into an industry or anything like that. But, I'd gotten into games sort of late, actually, just a couple years prior. And I just kept finding that I was more interested in figuring out how the game worked rather than how to beat the game. And so I guess it was just over like summer break in middle school that I started learning programming and digital art and different things just through online resources, and ended up making my first game. And yeah, I kept doing that all through school and into college. And then, obviously that's continued through to today. In terms of favorite adventure games, I'm probably a little bit of an anomaly on this podcast, I suppose. I didn't grow up playing a whole lot of adventure games. My gaming tastes are sort of all over the place and have shifted quite a bit over the years. But I'd say I grew up probably playing mostly real-time strategy, sim games, role-playing games, sports games, things like that. But I feel like I always gravitated towards the story aspects, and certainly more so, over the last decade, I would say. More recently, Firewatch, of course, is a big influence and favorite of mine. Life is Strange, Telltale Walking Dead, or any of the Telltale games, really. And we've actually got a few Telltalers helping us out on Arctic Awakening. Virginia is another one. I know that one sort of has a mixed reaction, I suppose. But I always find constraints really interesting, and sort of I think applying artificial constraints can really amplify the creative aspect. So whether that worked for people or not, that's a different question. But I just thought it was interesting not having dialogue in that game. Give it a really different feel than a lot of other narrative-based games.
Yeah, that's some fantastic choices there. Now, I haven't played Virginia myself, but I have heard about it. As you said, I've heard mixed reaction to it, but yeah, it kind of makes me want to play it even more. With some people, I'm like, oh, it's obviously affected people, and people got a reaction out of it.
It's interesting, like using, you've eliminated that tool that's sort of the more traditional tool for telling a narrative, which is dialogue, and you've got to tell a cohesive story with basically nothing but animation, music, and sound effects. And so obviously that didn't work for some people, but I thought it worked really, really well for me.
Well, that's great to hear. I'm very curious to try it out. And then, yeah, you mentioned Firewatch. I love that game as well. And yeah, then Life is Strange and Telltale as well. Yes, now The Walking Dead is one of my favorite games of all time, actually, I would say, especially season 1 and season 4. I mean, all of the seasons I thought were great, but yeah, season 1 in particular, the interaction with Lee and Clementine, I thought was really, really good. I mean, it really, really, and to Clementine's arc throughout the 4 seasons, I thought was just fantastic as well. So, and great to hear that there are some people from Telltale who are helping you out. So yes. Sorry, go ahead. Yeah.
Oh, I was just going to say, yeah, it's really, Telltale really, the old Telltale, I guess they've been reincarnated, but the original Telltale really, helped standardize, or I don't know if standardize is the right word, but establish a lot of things for narrative and push things forward. So it's really nice to get some of that collective knowledge and have that expertise helping us out.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, they're, learn from the best is what they say. I think narratively speaking, they were some of the best, or are some of the best, I would say still. No, that's great. And so then getting on to, well, your studio. Now, you said you started making games since you were 13, which is, I'd say quite young. When did you, or do you want to talk? What kind of games did you make, or what was your first game that you made when you were 13? And then, well, that's the first question then, I guess. So, what game did you make when you were 13?
So the first game I made was called, keep in mind I was 13. I didn't have a great naming of it, but it was called Vinotopia. It was like a virtual pet game. So it was sort of, and again, even going back to that, there was this whole narrative thing going on, and sort of role-playing aspects and things like that. But at its core, it was a web-based virtual pet game.
Cool. And so presumably then you learn skills that would help you, with other games as well. What would you say would be the biggest things you learned, or I suppose now, like if you were like James from now, if you could talk to 13-year-old James, was there any advice that you would give to 13-year-old James now, or anything that you learned from then?
I mean, scoping is probably a really big thing. I always ended up making like large multiplayer games, which is not necessarily the smartest thing to do especially as a solo developer, and especially while you're still learning. But at the same time, back then it was a very different landscape. There wasn't, this would have been, now I'm feeling old, but this would have been early, 02, 03, something like that. How old am I? I guess it would have been 01 or something around then. So there wasn't, there wasn't the accessibility for like indie games and things like that you have now. There was no, it was all physical media unless it was web-based. So it's different, but definitely scope, starting with smaller projects, and working your way up from there is always important.
Yeah, because I believe the best advice, or what, not the best, but some of the most common advice that I hear from indie devs is to start small and to maybe get bigger and bigger. But you started big, as you mentioned, you make open world games. And Arctic Awakening seems to be an open world game as well. So it clearly hasn't stopped you.
Yeah.
But how did, and I'm just, curious as well, because you said you're doing it yourself, how did you manage to make open world games? I thought there were big studios who would make these. When I think of open world, I think of GTA, Red Dead Redemption, and then now you're saying that you made one yourself. How did you manage to do that without going crazy as well? Because you're clearly very ambitious. Is there any?
Yeah, I haven't listened to my own advice for sure.
Did any of us really?
Yeah, I mean, so my early games were mostly text-based, which made it a lot more feasible. I did artwork and things like that early on, but it was fairly, especially on those early ones at that point, where it was fairly minimal. Our games under Goldfire Studios, our early ones were much larger scale, but still, we were at that point team of 2 or 3 on some of our early games. And yeah, I mean, it's tricky. It's just, I think indies especially underestimate like how important project management skills are, time management, and knowing like where to focus your efforts. If you put in the necessary planning and stick to, not necessarily the plan, it's going to change as you go along, but stick to the process and always keeping the scope in mind, you can accomplish some pretty big things. But yeah, it was, I wouldn't say, there were definitely points where it was a little crazy, but we
I can imagine.
through.
Oh, well, congratulations on that. So Then now I believe Goldfire Studios. You founded the studio. Then I take it. So I was wondering if you could tell us when you founded the studio and what your objectives with the kind of games that you wanted to make. So what kind of games you wanted to make from the studio?
Yeah, so I'm not really sure when I exactly started using the name, because it goes all the way back to when I was in high school. But the studio on paper was founded in 2008 when I was still in school. But really, I say the studio was founded in 2012, which was when I was out of school and started, working on it full time, building a team, and really figuring out a direction for the studio. And since then, our focus has really been always on, the way we describe it is to connect people around the world through a shared love of story. And so we haven't always done, purely narrative-based games, but we've always tried to put story either through a story that we tell or enabling players to tell their own stories. We've always had that as a core element of the games that we've worked on. And up until this point, it's always been, sort of casual, massively multiplayer games. I can't remember the second part of your question.
Yeah, no. What the I think you're answering anyway.
Okay. Yeah.
What the objectives were to start, but you mentioned about working with others as well through story as well, and that you were up until that point you were making massive multiplayer games.
Yeah. So we've always liked the community aspect and interacting with the community and building games in the open with the involvement of our community. It's a little trickier doing a single player game, but I think we've been able to leverage the community from those past games to bleed into this one, and we're still trying to do more community-based things, even though it's not a multiplayer experience. We think just like with TV shows and things like that, it's fun to talk about the theories and different ideas with coworkers or friends or whatnot, and we're hoping to try and create that same sort of experience.
Yeah, no, that sounds great. I mean, yeah, definitely TV series like probably one of the most famous ones with series is Lost, and more recently with Marvel. I know with WandaVision. I was just reading theories all over the place. So yeah. And now you mentioned before recording as well, speaking with the community, that you help to you help to grow other game development studios in Oklahoma, where you're based as well. Is that correct as well? You want to talk a little bit about that, and then we can go on to Arctic Awakening?
Yeah, sure. So I'm trying to think. I guess it would have been 2013. We had done a Kickstarter for really our first game as like an actual studio with a team, and there was just three of us at that point, and we realized we didn't know anyone else locally that was doing game development. And so basically we just set up a meetup page for Oklahoma game developers, tweeted it out, and we had no idea if anyone was going to show up. And we ended up having, I think, 50 or 60 people at the first meeting. Yeah, so it turns out there's, none of them were doing it professionally. It was all, hobby projects and things like that. But we've continued doing monthly meetups for almost 10 years now. It's just, we have people give talks, we do workshops, we do, actually next month we're having a demo day where people, are going to show off games they've been working on. And so we were the first like commercial game studio in Oklahoma City when we got started. And now I want to say there's 4 or 5 commercial studios. And I actually just talked to another one I hadn't heard of before yesterday. So it's definitely, there's other factors. It's not just the meetup, but it's good to see that we're having some impact.
Yeah, no, that's great. And how an idea like that you're not sure if people turn up. And I'm sure on the other hand, when people saw this meetup, they were thinking, oh, good people like me, I can maybe go meet up because they might have thought, oh, maybe I'm the only one, making these games from this area. But I'm sure it serves a great, confidence booster to people to, if they have any questions or if they're, running through any difficulties that everyone else can just chip in and help them out as well. So, no, sounds great, and it's still continuing to this day. And I assume, during COVID, it's still going as well. That's that's great to hear as well.
Yeah, COVID has made it a little tricky. We haven't had we're still doing virtual meetups.
Oh, okay.
So we haven't had an in-person. Since COVID started. It's still, we set up a Discord and things like that, so it's still been going strong.
No, that's great to hear. So we spoke about your studio, and then the reason we're here is to talk about your game Arctic Awakening, and there have been a few trailers, and I played the demo as well from, I think, the Steam Next Fest as well, which I really enjoyed. I wanted to ask then, when did you first get the idea for Arctic Awakening? Do you remember when that idea started going around in your head?
So the idea, I think it really started as more of an idea for a film project, which is another area that I'm interested in.
Oh, that would be also interesting.
And I remember sort of just toying around with the idea. I've just got a notes folder on my phone where I'll just jot down ideas for games or anything else. And I think it was probably in there for a couple of years before we actually started working on it. But it just sort of kept nagging at me. It kept coming back up, and I kept thinking that there was more to this idea. And after we'd finished our previous game back in 2019, we were trying to figure out what we wanted to do next. And basically, when we do that as a studio, we have an internal pitch day where everyone will spend a couple weeks brainstorming ideas on their own, and then we'll all come in and pitch ideas and then sort of whittle down from there. And I didn't know exactly what this would be, but I just felt like the seed of this story, it's evolved so much more from that initial seed, but the seed of this idea, I thought it had legs because it just kept, I couldn't stop thinking about it. And and everyone else on the team was really excited about it as well. And so we sort of ran with it from there.
Yeah, no, as I told you before recording, when I first saw this game announced and I saw the trailer, I thought, wow, this game seems like it was made for me. I mean, I know obviously it wasn't, but I'm like, wow, this seems like exactly the kind of game that I would love. So I was wondering if you could tell us about the game, the setup of the story. Well, first of all, yeah, what can you tell us about who we are? And I mean, I know we're in the Arctic, but what can you tell us about the setup of the game?
Yeah, so you're playing as Kai, who's an ex-Navy pilot, and basically you're going on sort of just a routine delivery flight. He basically does cargo runs and things like that. And you're flying out there with your co-pilot and a court-mandated therapy robot who's named Alfie. And plane goes down in a storm. You're stranded somewhere in the wilderness of Alaska in the middle of winter. And by the way, it's near future, so it's set in the year 2062. And so that's sort of the inciting incident. Effectively, your co-pilot has gone missing. He bailed out as the plane was going down. So you're basically stranded with this therapy robot, and you've got to go on this journey with that robot to try and locate your missing co-pilot. But along the way, there's all sorts of mysterious things that you encounter, sci-fi aspects, different things like that. But really, the core of the story has to do with the relationship between Kai and the robot Alfie, and how that evolves, and friendship and mental health and things of that nature.
Yeah, no, as I said, I played a demo and I loved it. And I'm even more interested in playing the game when it's released as well. And now, and I wanted to ask you as well, because I'm sure one of the first things that people listening might be thinking is that it might be similar to The Long Dark, which we spoke about. And so, well, first of all, have you or anybody in the team played The Long Dark, or is this a coincidence that the game might sound a little, I'm sure it's very different, but just on the surface. So have
we do keep hearing this comparison. I haven't actually played The Long Dark. I own it. I bought it with the intention to play it a while back, and like most people, have a big backlog of games to get caught up on. I don't believe anyone else on the team has played it either, but it's certainly something we're aware of. Any similarities in the story beyond that are coincidental, and I gather that the main point of comparison is the setting, and then the fact that it sort of starts out with a plane crash.
Yeah, that's what I believe as well. Now, when I was playing The Long Dark, I was thinking, and I believe I may have mentioned this when I reviewed it on the podcast, because as I told you pre-recording, I died a lot, and I kind of rage quit that game because I couldn't kill this freaking bear, which kept killing me, and I was playing this on easy mode. And I think I said Long Dark would be amazing for me if they just removed the survival elements, if you didn't have the stress of surviving, either of freezing to death or being killed. Or I know it's the whole point of that game, but what I wanted was, story and exploration focused. So now again, don't have to answer if it's a spoiler, but are there any survival aspects to this game, or is this focused mainly on the story or exploration? Or is, again, you don't have to answer if it's a spoiler, but are you able to say anything at all about that?
Yeah, so I wouldn't classify it as a survival game. You're not going to freeze to death or starve or things
that's
like
good.
that. Those aren't really the mechanics of the game. It is much more focused on the narrative, and I've had the same experience where I get stuck and get frustrated on even if it's like a puzzle that hasn't been put together well, or a bear. I don't know that I've necessarily been killed over and over by a bear, but yeah,
that's not pleasant.
That was something we really wanted to avoid, and that's sort of been one of our pillars within the game, is avoiding that type of scenario where you run up against something that hinders your ability to progress through the narrative. So
no, that sounds fantastic to me, because I wanted to, even the location, the environment, it's just so interesting for me that I wanted to, be able to concentrate and focus on that and the characters and the story. But then again, I know it's a Long Dark that the whole point was survival, but this game seems like it's more for me than that game. So now we've established it's more story focused game. What can you tell us? Now he's spoken about the setup. What can you tell us about the characters that, maybe without giving spoilers? So I really like the interaction between the demo with all the characters, with Kai and Donovan, and then the robot who you mentioned, the therapy robot, because Kai doesn't like the robot. But what can you tell us about the characters without giving any spoilers? Or that you have, or I know you spoke a little bit about them, but is there anything else you'd be able to tell us about them?
Yeah, so I guess from a gameplay perspective, it's there's obviously a lot of games that have like a robot companion, but generally I feel like they play more of a secondary or passive role, and we wanted to make Alfie a much more active participant in the story. So he's going to be helpful for you. There's going to be a relationship there, and part of that is the choices you make are going to influence that as well. But like I said, you'll be, you're searching for Donovan, your co-pilot. So he's not really present there with you, but this robot always is. This robot I'm trying to think. Well, this would have been in the demo. He's got as part of the court mandate, he's got a proximity rule, so he can't go out of range of you. So you're always going to be with this robot, and so it's a very active relationship because of that.
Yeah, no, I love that idea as well, that Kai might consider that the robot is kind of spying on him, or it won't get out of his face, but then that's exactly what the robot is supposed to do. But then the interactions with him, when I think he asks him, can you do anything useful? And the robot says, well, I can talk about it with you. And no, but I really loved the dialogue in the demo, at least, as well. And then you mentioned the choices in the game as well. So I wanted to ask you then, so will the choices, again, without spoilers, will they affect the story or the characters, or what can we expect in terms of gameplay that you can talk about? Yeah,
so a little bit of both. It more leans on the character side. I talked about scope earlier. The quickest way to get out of scope is to massively branch your story. So, there is a core storyline that you follow, but you can definitely sort of weave in and out of that based on the choices. And then there are some more, significant branches as well, that, you won't necessarily know when those are coming, but hopefully you'll sort of feel that as you're going through it. So there's going to be impacts on both fronts.
Cool. And then with regards to the gameplay as well, it felt like, just from the demo alone, that it was actually open world. That you spoke about scope. Its world seemed really big, and I can't remember playing many open world adventure narrative games. So again, how did you go about at least creating the feeling that it was open world? I mean, I always thought that only big developers could do this. How did you manage to do it with this game?
Yeah, it's been a challenge, because in addition to that, it is a fairly large world, and in addition to that, because of the scenario, we can't have a map. It wouldn't make sense narratively to have a map. So the level design is really, really important. We want to give that feeling of actually being lost in the wilderness, but we also obviously don't want you to actually get lost and not be able to continue the story. So yeah, I mean, there was a lot of planning and iteration really early on. Sort of a high level view of the map itself is actually pulled from a real location in Alaska, and then modified, to fit what we need. But yeah, I mean, a lot of it has just been building custom tools to really facilitate that. Without building those custom tools, I don't think it would be possible for a team of our size to make it all work. And we are still in the middle of development. There's still a lot of work left to go, but a lot of the sort of overworld is mostly mapped out, and a lot of it's built.
Cool. Yeah, no, it's I mean, as I said, it felt open world. It looks fantastic as well. And and
I will say on that front, it actually is, like, the whole game takes place in one continuous area. So unlike like Walking Dead, where you're sort of transitioning to different scenes, this is, you will be walking and exploring to the different areas of the map, and without transitioning and things like that.
Okay, so that might make it easier, say, not to get lost. I mean, you want to be feeling to be lost, but to be able to find your way to the locations.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's easy. There's pros and cons. We could just transition you to where we want you to go, but exploration is definitely a part of that, and sort of finding your way.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, if it's an exploration game, then I take it to be some exploration. But yeah, and then I was reading through your blog about the development of the game, and now you seem to have really gone all out to try to experience what the character might experience. You mentioned that the character is a pilot and he gets stuck in the wilderness. First of all, you actually flew a plane, is that correct? In preparation for development of this game. What can you tell us about that?
Well, I mean, partly it was just a good excuse to take a flight lesson that I'd always wanted to do, but it was actually really beneficial. So early on, getting ready to developing the character and getting ready to start writing dialogue and things like that, I felt like it was important to understand even just a little bit better the mindset of a pilot. And obviously doing one flight isn't going to get you all the way there, but yeah, there's a flight school here at one of the smaller airports, and so I went over there and did a flight in a little Cessna, and to my surprise, the instructor, basically we got in the air and the instructor was like, "You have control now."
Wow. And
so
this
I got
wasn't
to fly for about 30 minutes. Yeah.
This wasn't a simulation, was it? This was an actual plane?
No, yeah, this was an actual plane.
Wow. And the plane didn't crash, unlike the game.
Yeah, so that was the one good thing. That would have given me the ultimate experience, but I was glad to avoid that piece of it. Yeah.
Well, that's good to hear. That's great to hear. So you didn't go, too much in character. You didn't go too method.
Yeah.
And do you think that helped? For the writing of maybe the dialogue for the character, or at least the scenes where he's flying the plane.
Yeah. So that opening scene to the game did not exist before I did that. And after I did that flight, I went and wrote that entire new scene to change how the game started.
Oh, so that's authentic then. That is actual, how plane works. Great. And then I believe you also, now you mentioned you didn't go all the way to Alaska, but I believe you went to the Rocky Mountains. Is that correct?
Yeah. So a trip to Alaska on a little indie budget is a little, again, out of scope, but here in Oklahoma City, it's a quick and cheap flight to Denver. So yeah, just got a sort of a secluded cabin up in the mountains in the Rockies, and in the middle at peak snow season. So I went up there with no phone, no internet, no TV. I'm trying to 8 or 9 days, I think. Yeah, just sort of simulating the isolation. It doubled for a lot of things. Is getting the experience of the isolation. I was using it as a sort of a writer's retreat as well. So I was doing a lot of the initial writing from there. And then I did a bunch of hiking in like blizzard conditions.
Wow.
Or semi-blizzard conditions. And just took a ton of video. So I took a GoPro, like a head mount, and got a bunch of first-person footage hiking through the snow. Took a bunch of notes and photos and videos and things like that. So yeah, I mean, there's a lot of really great reference material that it has gone into the environment. We found it really important to try and ground both the environment and the story in reality as much as possible to at least make it plausible from that sense. But yeah, I mean, all sorts of little details, like I noticed that the birds would start chirping right as the sun would come up, and that would continue until early afternoon, and it would sort of start to die out, and there was another sort of peak in the later afternoon, and then in the evening onwards it was pretty much silent. And so we've sort of added that pattern into the environment and things of that nature.
Fantastic. So again, it's if the game feels authentic, it's because you actually did this. You experienced it. You were like Kai. You flew a plane and you were in these conditions in a winter setting. So,
but again, thankfully, I had access to a grocery store and didn't have to live off the land. So.
Right.
Didn't go full method.
So, and did you have to collect branches to build a fire? Or?
No, there was a heater as well. So
okay.
I didn't go that extreme.
So, but still, it's it's something at least. You still go, to find out how a character would be in those conditions to some extent. But no, fantastic. And then I noticed as well that I believe it mentioned that this game, is it going to be released in one full game but in episodes? Is that correct? That it was supposed to be released first of all as episodic games?
Yeah. So so we ended up switching the model on that, but it is still, the story is still broken up into episodes. They'll just all be released at once. But from the very beginning, we knew we wanted to do that model. We just really liked sort of the television format of being able to break it up into sort of more digestible chunks. I know for me, I have a hard time playing, especially like AAA games that are just so long. It's just hard to get started on those. And I just know I'm never going to be able to finish them. So we wanted to do something where it's like, okay, I've got an hour, so I can play through an episode. So that was part of it. And then just in terms of like character development, just that sort of structure works so well for that, and sort of compartmentalizing and whatnot. So we knew we wanted to do that from the beginning. The original plan was to release in episodes every month, but there's been a spotty track record with that sort of model in games, and so we just decided to do it all as once, as one release, and just keep them broken up in the actual game, so you can play it at your own pace.
Yeah, I mean, well, as it happens, Telltale, I heard, were pretty good at that, the episodic release, which but yeah, and I think now what companies have done, including the developers of Life is Strange, and that is still have like the episodic format but all at once. And I think Telltale are doing that with Wolf Among Us Part 2. So you still have it, and we found out the dangers of it with Telltale The Walking Dead season 4. Thankfully they were able to finish it, but yeah, you're still able to keep the TV format that with episodic release as well. So no, that sounds great. And now from the demo as well, the voice acting I found was fantastic. The characters were believable.
Thanks.
Of all of them, including the robot. And I was able to, I just believed in the characters. Now, I suppose before we get to that, another thing that you mentioned in your blog that I found interesting was, I believe, to put placeholder dialogue, was it Google text to speech?
Yeah.
So I wonder if you could talk about that, maybe for other developers. How did that work, and how did that help you creating the dialogue for this game?
Yeah, that was a big benefit. We knew, recorded dialogue. Well, two things. We knew we didn't have the budget to record and re-record over and over like some of the bigger studios do, and we also didn't want to just effort-wise doing developer dialogue where, though it would have been hilarious, but recording the dialogue manually ourselves to just put in as placeholders we didn't feel like a good option. We spent quite a bit of time on custom tooling, and we built this tool called that we call Storydb. That it's basically like a CMS for the dialogue, and it's really helpful for both the localization and the voiceover. And so basically, we just hooked into Google's text-to-speech API, which at this scale is free. And whenever whenever we load a line in there, it just automatically generates the dialogue, and then we can sync that into Unity, and then it's able to play in the game. And so it's really helpful to be able to test the pacing and the rough timings for like dialogue along a certain trail or different things like that, and just see how things are working.
Yeah, well, I'm glad to hear that it helped. And any point did you consider using that as the final voiceover?
No,
I'm kind of joking. I mean, I was hoping not, but
it was especially hilarious during the opening scene when the plane is going down, because it's a very tense moment, and the voices are just so monotone. Oh no, the tail is gone, sort of thing. So it was a very exciting moment when we had actual dialogue in there, and it just sort of completely changed the tone of those scenes.
I can imagine. Well, thankfully, as I mentioned, the voice actors were not monotonous. They were quite good. So what if you could talk to me a little bit about them? So who are the voice actors for the two main characters and the robot?
So we're really excited about our cast. We spent about 4 or 5 months, I'd say, on the casting. We really wanted to make sure we nailed it, because we knew that was just a really important aspect to convey the emotional elements and to really be able to connect with the characters. So first and foremost, we're working with Julian Koznesky from Bay Area Sound, who started at LucasArts back in the 90s, and then he did voice direction and sound design for pretty much all of the Telltale stuff, including Walking Dead, and also worked on Firewatch and Call of the Sea and a bunch of other stuff.
Wow, well, I've definitely heard of him, yes. Yeah,
so we're really excited to have him on board. He's really great. And for our actors, so Kai, the player character is Jason Manacia, who you probably won't have heard of from games or VO, but he's a 30-year vet of the theater, so he's a really great actor, and I think he just embodies the character really, really well. And then Donovan, the co-pilot, is Dave B. Mitchell, and Alfie is Alejandro Saab. Those are two that you've probably heard in a bunch of games without realizing it. Each of them have been in well over 200 games, anime, TV shows, things like that, both indie, AAA, and everything in between. So we're really excited to have them on board. And then we're also working with, or we will be working with Chia Court, who plays a character who she doesn't come along until a little bit later in the story. So we haven't done any recording with her yet, but she's also got a really stellar track record, and we're excited to have her on board as well.
Fantastic. And are you working with them remotely, or are you working with them in a studio, or how are they recording the lines for the game?
Yeah. So it's all remote. I think these days, thanks to the pandemic,
pretty much everything.
Voice actors have a really good home studio, but that was one of the requirements while we were going through the casting, because we knew that was something we would need. We're a remote team as well, and so it worked for us, and it's more budget friendly for an indie to do it that way as well.
Yeah, no, absolutely. It's we've all had to work remotely, I think, or a lot of us during the pandemic, and there are definitely some benefits as well. And you wouldn't notice in the game. Then about the music, do you have someone doing the music in the game and the sound design? Do you have anyone doing that, or are you doing that yourselves?
Yeah, so we're working with a composer out of London named Joff Winks, and he's doing the music. And then one of our developers actually has a background in music as well, so he's helping on that front, and he's leading up the sound design. But then, like I said, Julian Koznesky also has done a whole lot of sound design, so he's helping out on that front as well.
Perfect. Yeah, no, well, I'm sure it'll sound good as well. And then actually I wanted to ask you about, marketing the game and the demo as well. Because one thing I'm curious about is with a narrative focused game, when releasing a demo, now I know this game is kind of the prologue to demo. Did you think hard about what to show of the game? Because were you thinking if I show anything might be spoilers, or because I know some developers have just a separate prologue just to show what the game is like, but then of course that's more work. So how did you go about that, choosing what to show in the demo, or was this always the decision? Was this always going to be the beginning, or how did you come to the decision to show what's in the demo of the story?
Yeah, that was definitely a challenge, and it was something we were, a little bit concerned with. We hadn't planned to do a demo early on, so we weren't necessarily planning for that. But just from a marketing standpoint, it's demos. It seemed like demos went away for a long time, and now they're really coming back.
Yeah, they've come back in a big way. Yeah.
For marketing. So the good thing for us is we are developing the game basically in a unlike a movie or something where you're filming the different scenes all out of order. We're developing basically in order. So the most polished part of the game was the very beginning of the game, and that would be obviously the part without really spoilers. And so it sort of just worked out. Now, I will say that the demo certainly was not nearly as polished as we would have liked. But when you're participating in various festivals and whatnot, you sort of have to work to that timeline.
Okay, so will there be any changes in the main game then to this?
Yeah, so we got a lot of really great feedback. We've adjusted some pacing issues we found in the dialogue and things like that. But I'd say probably the biggest issue we ran into was with the robot's AI and his navigation, which was something we knew, we were still working on, but it was clear from the demo that it was a bigger issue than we had realized. So we've been basically just completely overhauling that, and it's almost done now, and it's looking a lot better. But I had mentioned, I think that we really wanted to focus on player agency, so that it didn't just feel like you're on a rail. It felt like you're actually lost in the wilderness. And so we didn't want you to just be following Alfie everywhere. But that's how most people perceived it when they played the demo. And because Alfie wasn't actually leading you anywhere, it just got you lost, like actually lost. So yeah, we've sort of been overhauling how that stuff works. And I think it's going to be a lot more intuitive and make the exploration a lot more dynamic and interesting.
Cool. Well, at least it seems to be helping. So would you say a demo has helped with promoting the game and getting the word out about there? Then do you think that has helped?
Yeah, it's been huge for the marketing for the game. I'd say the exposure has gone up probably 4x in just the last 2 months.
Wow.
Around wish lists on Steam and social media and the community that we've got on Discord and things like that. It feels like we've got a snowball going, to use a themed term.
Absolutely. Well, no, that might become an avalanche, hopefully. No, that sounds fantastic. And then the trailers have been pretty good as well. Did you create the trailers yourselves, or did you get an outsource? Do you outsource the trailers, or how did you make those?
Yeah, so we're working with a freelance trailer editor, Benjamin Combs. He's worked on both of the trailers with us. And yeah, I mean, it's really a collaborative thing. We sort of bounce ideas off and sort of figure out an outline, and he'll go in and capture different things and experiment, and then we'll go through a couple weeks of iteration until we land on what we like and get it polished up.
Cool. And I imagine it's similar to a demo that you have to be careful not to show any spoilers, but you want to show enough to entice people to play the game. And
yeah, and it's difficult because you have to think about, like, in a trailer, you need to keep the idea of it simple so that it's not confusing. It's immediately clear what's going on. But at the same time, you don't want to give the wrong impression that the game only revolves around that one thing. So it's sort of a balancing act. But yeah, going into it, we basically brainstormed a list of like spoilers or areas or things like that we just cannot show, and then other stuff that, like, this stuff would be okay to show, and just trying to whittle that down to a core that made sense.
I can imagine. Well, that's great. So I think that's all the questions that I had. Are you able to say if you are after? I know you're still hard at work on Arctic Awakening. Do you have any other ideas for any other games that you may be making afterwards? Are you able to say anything at all, or even yes or no? So after Arctic Awakening, do you have any other ideas or plans that you might be involved in making?
Yeah, so there's always more ideas, and we definitely have a big list of things, most of which we'll of course never get to. But yeah, we've built a lot of custom tooling for Arctic Awakening, and part of the reasoning for that is, like I said, I don't think we could have made the game without the tooling, but B, we're hoping that we can use that for future games like this, to help make it more feasible and to be able to, create these games more quickly. I don't know what that next thing is going to be. I will say, we've been getting a whole lot of interest, and this is not confirming anything, but we've gotten a whole lot of interest in VR for Arctic Awakening.
Oh, wow, yeah.
And it's something we were interested in early on, and thought that it could work well in that format. But again, coming back to scope, we just sort of set that idea aside, and we're like, we'll think about this again after we've actually finished the game.
Sure.
So that could be something, that we explore in the short term after the game is complete. But beyond that, it'll probably be the same thing where we'll internally pitch different ideas and sort of figure out what gets the team excited.
Yes, no, you could. I can definitely see VR with this game working. From the little I've played in the demo, I think that could be pretty cool. I mean, maybe you could set your next game in the Antarctica, because we have the snowy locations. Just add, are the penguins and polar bears there, or I always get confused. No, that sounds great. And do you have any? Where will this game? Do you plan on releasing this game? It's a PC. Do you plan on releasing it on consoles as well?
Yeah, so we don't have the exact lineup confirmed just yet, although hopefully we will here before too long. But the plan is Xbox and PlayStation. We'd like to do Switch at some point. That one definitely won't be feasible at launch, just because, just for technical reasons, it'll be a much larger port. We use some to get the large forest rendering. We use some shader techniques that just aren't supported on the Switch.
Right, yeah, that makes sense. And yeah, so where can people find you? So if they wanted to find out more about the game Arctic Awakening or about your studio, where can people find you? Now, I will include links in the show notes, but just for people listening, is there anywhere that they can find out more about both your studio and the game?
Yeah, for the game, it's just arcticawakening.com, and there's a link to wishlisted on Steam there as well. For the studio, it's goldfirestudios.com. And yeah, and we try and post, regular dev blogs and things like that. And then on social media, primarily Twitter. So for me, it's at Goldfire Studios, and for the game, it's at Arctic Awakening.
Perfect. Well, I shall include the links then in the show notes. And yes, this is a reminder to people listening to wishlist. I believe that really helps developers, correct, for people to wishlist. That really helps you to have an idea of how many people are interested in your game.
Yeah, wishlisting, especially for indies, is really helpful because it's also something that Steam uses to determine visibility and things like that as part of their mysterious algorithm. And so yeah, when talking about marketing for indie games, it's wishlisting on Steam is definitely our big focus and really helps us out.
Okay, well, so people can wishlist on Steam, and include a link to that as well in the show notes. And yeah, I think that is that is it. So is there anything else that you'd like to mention, James, that we haven't covered, we haven't mentioned before we finish, or anything you'd like to say to finish us off? I know, well, not to finish us off. Wow, that sounded, or to finish the interview. Finish us off in the Arctic. Some guy with, I don't know, an axe, but so take it away, James. If there's anything that you would like to mention to people listening, or anything?
I think we covered most of the stuff, but I guess the one thing I would say, or the one thing I would bring up that I think is a little bit different about how we've approached this game is what we call story first. And I'm hoping that this will show through in the end product. But traditionally games are made where the mechanics and the gameplay and things like that are figured out first, and then you sort of attach a story on top of that. And so we wanted to flip that script, and any mechanic, any gameplay, any prop or piece of art or anything like that, we pass it through that what we call a story first filter. If it's not something that's going to elevate the story, push the story forward, or in some way benefit the story, it probably doesn't belong in the game. And so, when I talked about it's not a survival game, it's about the story. That's something that we really got at the core, and we really want to make it a really great story experience. Again, talking about TV, that was really a driving influence early on, was all of the great TV that we've got, and the idea that games can be an even better storytelling medium than film or TV. And we don't feel like it's gone all the way to that level. Now, I'm not saying that we're going to take it there, but if we can, do our little part to help push it more towards that direction, then, that's definitely a goal for us.
Fantastic. So there's no grinding or moon logic puzzles that are illogical and fit outside the story. Then everything was focused on the story then in the game, to make sure the story comes first.
Yeah, and there's certainly things you could classify as puzzle that make you think to figure things out, but it's again, it always goes through that filter. If we don't use the word puzzle when we talk about it, because that feels like something that's not natural to the story. It has to come out of the story. It has to be driving the story forward. in some way.
Fantastic. And so what do you, is there a word for these things instead of puzzles, like challenges or anything that's so it's integrated into the story, but do you have a word for them?
That's a good question. I guess we don't, now that I think about it.
Gameplay element for the story?
Yeah, I guess we just refer to it as gameplay. We really should come up with a term for that, I suppose.
Yeah, because I mean, I know some people call them obstacles, but then I don't like that word personally, because that just feels like obstacle, like that's just there arbitrarily to prevent you from reaching the next part. But what you're doing is fitting them in, integrating them into the story. So well, look, no, but that sounds great. That sounds like exactly the kind of games that I like. That and I forgot to ask you as well, do you have a particular release date or release year when you hope the game will be out?
Yeah, so we're not sure at what point, but it'll be released at some point next year. As we get closer, we'll obviously have a little bit of a better idea. But first and foremost, we don't want to. We are self-publishing, and part of that is we want to be able to achieve our vision for the game, and if that means pushing things out a little bit further, then we're prepared to do that.
Yeah, no, absolutely. When it's ready.
Yeah.
Or sometime in 2023, but yeah, when it's ready. Well, thank you so much, James. It's been an absolute pleasure to speak to you. As I said, I can't wait for this game. This went really high on my personal playlist when I first saw it, and I love story focused games, narrative focused games. So, and these locations, that I'm really looking forward to as well. So well, thank you so much. A very best of luck, and I will of course be covering this game and development of this game as well, and the very, very best of luck with making of the game, and I hope we'll chat soon. We'll keep in touch.
Yeah, thanks so much. It's been really fun talking about all of this.
So that was my interview with James Simpson. I hope you enjoyed it. Hope you stuck around at least until the end. It was well worth it, at least I think so. It was great talking to him, and I cannot wait for this game. As you may have heard, I played what I could of The Long Dark, but I couldn't finish it because it was too difficult for me, and I love the setting, and so I really wanted a game like The Long Dark but focused on the story and not focusing on the survival aspect. And hey, it seems like this game, Arctic Awakening, was made just for me. So I really cannot wait. As from what I played with the demo as well, it's looking really good. So I cannot wait for it to be released. So I'll leave the links in the show notes. You can in the description where you can wishlist on Steam and find out more about it as well from the game's official website. And so that is it for this episode. We'll be joined next time by Thomas and Laura, as we'll be reviewing the latest games that we've played, or will we? Because I will be on holiday, so hopefully I'll be able to make it, and hopefully I'll have played at least one game. But we shall see. So please join us next time, and thank you again for listening and for watching. And I'll talk to you guys soon. Take care. If you like the Adventure Games podcast, then please subscribe, rate, and review wherever you listen to podcasts. Please leave a review on iTunes if you can, as every review helps, and reviews will help get the word out, especially for adventure game developers who appear on the podcast. Now, you can also follow me on social media. You can follow me on Twitter at AdventGamePod. You can follow me on Facebook at Adventure Games Podcast. You can also follow me on Instagram at Adventure Games Podcast as well. And we're also on Discord at Adventure Games Podcast. So if you are an adventure game developer or adventure game player, you can follow us there. So again, please feel free to retweet and share podcast episodes and the podcast to people who believe may enjoy it. And you can also find more information about the podcast on www.adventuregamespodcast.com. So until next time, thank you.